Hi everyone, I'm Luron and welcome to HRD Live's podcast where we discuss a number of topics related to people-centric topics and human capital. This week we have Karen Gaynor and we'll be discussing creating a rewards benefits culture for the environment and the workforce. So Karen, I guess we'll start off with if you could talk about your role and responsibilities at Siemens.
Yeah, of course. So I'm responsible for the design and implementation of the best reward solutions that we can provide to employees and to Siemens. And I'm part of a global expert team of comp and ben professionals, as we call ourselves. And we work collaboratively together to try and provide the best solutions to all, both employees and to Siemens. And globally, I'm part of an organisation which has got over 380,000 minds applied to creating the best technology for society in the future.
Great.
So it's a very interesting place to work.
Sounds good. So what would you say are the biggest challenges behind your role?
I think being part of a multinational organisation and obviously a constantly changing environment, I think that the challenge is trying to meet the needs and provide brilliant reward solutions, but in so many different countries with different cultures, different demographics, so different employee expectations, different profitability, market positions, etc. So trying to collate and understand all of the business demands, employee demands, and trying to create reward solutions that meet all of those, and they change. So what employees want today is not what they're going to want tomorrow. So I think that's the fun in the reward space for us.
Is that the kind of things that made you interested in your role that you're doing now?
Yeah, I actually started out as a HR business partner, so most of my career has been in that space, which has given me a really solid foundation for what HR is and what employees want and their understanding of some of these topics, because I learned a lot through that you may have fantastic reward offerings like pension in particular, but people don't understand it and they don't value it. So a lot of my job is not just about what you offer, but how you offer it in a way that employees can, really connect with and understand. So a lot of effort goes into communication and education to help people. So moving into the reward space from that background has been, a nice background for me to try and understand employee demands.
Great. So what would you say are the biggest industry trends in the rewards and benefits sort of environment?
That's interesting. I think there's a few at the moment. I think the increasing amount of demand for agility, I know that's a very fashionable phrase, but it really is becoming apparent in an organisation that whereas we used to run like performance appraisal processes, which kind of ran across a year, very rigorous, sit down at the beginning, sit down at the end, and that then led into reward outcomes like a bonus payment or something similar. That's starting to feel like it's out of place with the pace of change. So, you set objectives and 2 weeks later, they're no longer relevant to you. So trying to measure against those objectives at the year end is just looking at something, that doesn't feel real to the individual. And it's very hard for individuals to say, well, I've done all of this, but I didn't do that. How do you assess that in a business environment? So I think the changing objectives that we're seeing and the fact that employees can't really measure how well they've done across that year and how managers measure that, I think is a real change in terms of how things are going to move in reward. And we're starting to see more immediate rewards coming to the front and that kind of annual reward moving a little bit more into the background. So I think there's still a place for the annual reward mechanisms, but I think you're going to see more and more of recognition and that kind of instant reward, not just top down, but also from peer to peer, across the organisation, across the global network.
Okay, sounds interesting. So you touched briefly upon individuals, and obviously there's different sort of types of rewards. So could you maybe highlight the pros and cons of individual-based incentives compared to team-based incentives?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I never advocate just going entirely in one direction or the other. I think that's a little bit too purist. But the advantage with very individual type rewards is that you can relate to them. You can see exactly what you're targeted with, and then your performance at the year end, typically you can say how you've contributed. So that's a good line of sight, as we would say, to individuals. The downside is that may not encourage you to work in teams and support your team members and, be more flexible in what you do. It may encourage you to be rigorous to what's written on paper rather than what is actually really needed, next week rather than what was documented previously. So for individual rewards, I think they have their place. People can connect with them. But we are seeing more of a shift towards collective rewards. So, either the global company or a country and how well it's performed as a business and, sharing that success with employees. So that's definitely a shift that we are seeing. And again, more towards the recognition kind of space as well. The downside of the collective, country level is, I did a great job, but the business didn't, and I don't really get any rewards from that. So they can feel like it's a disconnect for individuals. And if you go very, very high in the organisation, maybe towards a global level kind of profit share, then you can't relate to it at all because maybe your country's done amazingly, but globally we're seeing something very different, maybe a global downturn which is affecting performance. So you start to lose the line of sight, but you are sharing in the company's true performance and success. So I don't advocate ever going entirely one way or the other, but actually having maybe a blend of those. And again, moving more towards more instant recognition or something similar, I think kind of creates a nice blend for individuals.
Okay, cool. So how would you advise sort of businesses to tackle unconscious biasness when it comes to rewards and benefits? Because everyone unconsciously has sort of favourite preferences and favourite people they go to. So how would you advise leaders to tackle that situation?
Well, organisations are doing a huge amount in this space anyway, so I don't think it's just on reward to kind of solve this. I think people get very cautious when it comes to reward and bias because it's a very visible place and it's certainly not where you'd want inequity to be occurring. So I think reward is a space where perhaps we've been a bit more cautious about changing things. So that annual performance mechanism that we've talked about with annual bonuses and annual pay reviews, it's kind of still held on to by a lot of organisations because it has a lot of rigour around it. It takes away a lot of potential bias because you normally have some kind of calibration process or, kind of checks and balances to try and remove the biases that, as you say, are inevitably going to be there. So I don't think you can ever remove all of the biases. I think all of the initiatives that HR does with leadership around, training, education around being aware of our own biases, and then perhaps bringing in some checks and balances into the decision making. So reporting can help you. So, for example, in recognition, are you seeing any trends in, managers or leaders are typically nominating this category more than that category of individual? So you can start to bring that evidence and that information forward and potentially then encourage a change of behaviour from managers. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's reward's job to try and remove it all entirely. I think there's a lot of cultural stuff, leadership behaviour, which will help to set the tone for removing unconscious bias or recognising it's there because you can't remove it.
Yeah, definitely. So going back to having a blend of sort of individual and team incentives, how do you think business leaders can sort of fulfil employee expectations through these benefits at all, if they can at all?
Well, I think incentives is difficult because if you asked individuals what they want to do with incentives, they probably wouldn't have them. They'd probably just rather increase their base pay. So you don't ask employees what they want when it comes to the incentives topic. Okay. And I've seen some fantastic incentive solutions provided in the business, typically around sales, where it's very targeted. If you focus on this and you get these customer accounts, then, you will directly see a result. I've seen the most amazing sales incentive structures, but the effort it takes to maintain and run them and to administer and pay them regularly becomes rather significant. And I think I've seen a lot of areas of the business kind of go, I want this wonderful, incentive structure. But then when they have to execute it on a month-by-month basis, it becomes too big to warrant the kind of value that you get from it. Mm-hmm. So what we are seeing more is digital benefit solutions. So we're seeing much more of employee wanting choice. So like in the benefit space, what you and I might want today, tomorrow could be entirely different. And the old kind of landscape of reward in benefits was rather you get what you're given and you take it and, we hope you're happy with that. And we're moving much more with different demographics and different age of workers and different expectations. We all want that freedom that we have in our personal life. So I can go online on an app right now and change anything and buy insurances and do whatever I want. you expect the same in work. So if an organisation doesn't respond and start to provide that kind of flexibility and that freedom to kind of up my benefits, maybe buy something for my dependents or my family, or to sacrifice it because I don't need it, that flexibility is becoming more and more important. And whilst the UK in particular is probably quite familiar with this kind of flexible environment, it is a trend which is also growing globally. So we're seeing that moving into more and more countries where that expectation is also rising from employees too. So I think, certainly Siemens is looking at this and trying to push that kind of technology solution more and more into different countries. But I see that as a growing trend.
Yeah, and touching on technology, do you see that as becoming like a massive playing a massive part in the future of rewards and benefits in general?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I mean, we're constantly torn in reward between trying to standardise everything because it's really easy to administer, but then it's not really fit for purpose for different businesses, for different individuals, for different times of life, to having customised solutions. We can all get everything personalised now, can't we? So you want the same again in your work environment. Mm-hmm. So technology is the enabler for all of that. And I think if an organisation doesn't have that solid foundation of a good HR information system with a good digital benefits solution, I think they'll start to fall behind other companies which are offering it because it becomes the norm. I also think the technology will also be really, really helpful in what I call campaigns. So we've all got CEOs or, senior leaders who come along to us and they've had a brainwave in the night or they've heard something on the news and they want to do something similar. And they're almost expecting this campaign to run, within a couple of months. Without technology, you are almost dead in the water trying to run something like this. So I've seen chief executives who kind of want to run like a wellness campaign where you give individuals like a pot of money and then they can go spend it on whatever wellness means to them, whether it be gym membership, whether it be an insurance product for them because it makes them feel more protected, or whether it's an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or something. That's really challenging to execute from a HR function if you don't have the technology that allows you to do it. And there is technology now very easily available that allows you as an employee to log on, submit a receipt against a particular category, and it'll reimburse you for that. And then I'll show you later in a total reward statement or something similar how much that was to kind of remind you about the impact that it has on you. And we found, and I have to admit, I've been kind of constantly surprised by recognition, how much impact, that has. So you need the technology to help enable it, especially in global multinational organisations. I have a team across 15 different countries, and if I want to provide some kind of recognition to them, I can do something in a team meeting, and I should do something very personal, but to kind of execute something in a monetary way across 15 countries, I wouldn't even try because it's just too painful with all of the different tax and legislative environments, etc. So having the technology there that it, understands the different country requirements and expectations and tax, etc., it can make that easier for us to manage recognition. And I tell this story to people when I talk about the recognition that when I first came into this role, I went along to one of our organised events in the UK, which was like the most senior recognitions that had come up, so the biggest contributions to the organisation. And I went to this awards dinner and I was sat there questioning, it's a lot of effort to bring all of these senior leaders together, to bring all of the individuals that we've pulled out of all of the nominations and organise it all and make it look all glossy and wonderful. Is it really worth what effort we're putting into it for recognition? And a couple of nominations in, there was an individual who was on the table with us, and they're all sat there looking nervous when the nominations are being, compared and, discussed by the chief executive. And the guy on our table won. And he was part of a team, but he stood up and he punched the air with excitement. And that was a moment when I thought, Yeah, this isn't always about the money. This is about that, recognition for what you have done, the effort that you have put in, the behaviours that you have shown, how you're supporting the company. And it made him proud. And that's something he'll go home and talk about, and he'll tell his friends about. So there's something about recognition which is kind of shoutable, which isn't the same in the bonus space. If I was to give you a wonderful bonus, you'd probably go, "Thank you, Karen." But you probably wouldn't tell anybody. You'd probably keep it to yourself. Whereas if you got a recognition and that's kind of publicly applauded, you probably would go home and show, your family and your friends what you got with that recognition. So I think it puts it into a very different space, even though technically they might have the same monetary value attached behind it.
Okay, interesting. So taking a step on from technology, do you feel like artificial intelligence has a place in rewards and benefits? So do you feel like there's ever an opportunity for AI to automate rewards and benefits, or do you feel like it still needs a sort of personal touch of a human personalising it to match different workforces?
There's definitely some space for AI, absolutely. I mean, in a lot of the reward activities, there's a lot of data. So it's ripe for AI to come in and have a look at and bring that data together from multiple sources and potentially provide us with some analysis and conclusions. But I still think there's a space then for a mind to look at that and to use it for decision making. But if I look at things like salary benchmarking, the comparison of what your job is worth in the market, there's vast amounts of data available in most countries for this, and we've got individuals running that analysis and providing it back to a manager, and I don't think there's really going to be a need for that in the very near future. I think that will be something where you as a manager can say, I want the benchmark, AI will generate it and it will provide it to you in maybe a nice report as well that gives you some narrative around it rather than just the numbers, and then you'll have a reward partner maybe somewhere that you can talk to about what recommendations you might, what practices you might want to apply as a result of that data. So definitely some space for it. There's a lot of analysis that we do, the effectiveness of our reward. I think, again, we could bring AI into some of that space. But I still think a lot of reward has got very subjective elements. What do you want to do? Do you want to go route A, B or C? I can't see robots making those decisions, but I may be proved wrong.
Okay. So there are obviously different sorts of industries and different sizes of businesses. What would you say to companies who don't invest their time or funds in rewards and benefits? And how much of an impact do you actually think this has? I know you touched on this briefly, but maybe you could talk about other benefits and perks that comes along with adopting this culture within a business.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I'm in an organisation that does value rewards.
So I guess it's definitely a positive.
I'd like to think I've got a part in that, but it's a great team of people contributing and convincing people. I think the challenge is if you are in an organisation that doesn't really value it, like any HR practitioner, it's going to be a short-sighted view. I think the evidence will soon start popping up to you, whether it's people walking, they will leave with their feet. You will struggle to recruit them. That's normally when leaders start shouting and saying something's wrong, we need to do something different. And that's where we can come along and go, reward may be a part of that. So reward obviously is a very broad term. It can just mean the kind of financial, style topics, through from pension right through to insurances, recognition as we talked about. But it's also increasingly moving into the space of things like employee-led flexibility. So flexibility of your working hours, how and when you work. Some organisations put it in another space in HR, but for us, that's in the business partner and reward space. And for us, it's about making sure that we create an environment, which we're piloting, where employees can come along to us and say, I know you do this classic 9 to 5, but for me, I'd like to do this. So there's no sort of catalogue that they can pick from of what hours or practices they want. They tell us what they want, what will work for them in their personal circumstances. And I guess in reality, the default with us and many organisations has been, we'll listen, but we're probably going to say, 50-50 chances that you'll get what you've asked for. We're really changing that to be, if you want it, we will do our damnedest to make sure that that happens, because you're really important to us. And if we can't make this work, we can be absolutely sure somebody else will. So as an organisation, that's an area where we see much more sort of momentum for us to do more for our employees and to be more flexible around their demands.
Okay, cool. And the last question for me. So obviously Siemens is like a massive global business for over 15 countries. You must have a sort of multi-generational workforce with like people starting from 18 to like in their 70s.
Yep.
With that rewarding culture, have you noticed like a huge disparity between different age groups in demand for rewards? So have you seen a younger age group be more inclined to ask for more benefits? And have you seen an older age group? Can you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. Well, Siemens, first of all, operates in 190 countries. I'm just responsible for 15 of them, so I just have a small part of the world. And you're right, there is an absolute difference in what individuals want. You can't stereotype, so you can't assume that population, that age wants that. There are absolutely individual differences, but you do see some natural trends like... within the UK, for example, we tend to see that men are much more likely to purchase through the flexible benefit solution insurance-style products. So they obviously feel a responsibility for protecting their family with things like death in service benefits, additional critical illness cover and things like that. So there's definitely a male-female difference in terms of the selection there. And in terms of age... typically, this will be true for all of us, the closer you are to your retirement age, the more attention you will give to your pension. So that's going to happen to all of us, you know, and my job is to try and encourage every generation to try and take a little bit of interest in their pension and to tailor and, customise the communications to what level of interest you're prepared to give it. And then to make sure that if you choose not to give it any attention, that we put you into a decent pension and we get you decent pension outcomes, so that if you're still with us at that point, then you'll have a good retirement savings. That's the plan. You do see some of the younger generation more interested in the holiday purchasing. So, you know, the ability to buy more leave and take more time off. And we're also starting to see more demands coming through from recruitment. I've just got somebody joining in my team later this year and coming from university, and her first request was not about the salary or anything else. It was, can I have a month off to go skiing a couple of months after I've started? And our first reaction was, you should be so grateful, you know, that you have a job working here, not be asking for 1/12 of the year off, you know, immediately after joining. And then we went, why not? You know, we're part of a team. We can cover the different workload that we have. They'll be very loyal to us, we hope, you know, as a result of that. And, you know, she can tell us some wonderful stories about what she got up to when she got back. So I think there is an increasing demand, not just on that, but I think it's the attitude. There is more of a, if I don't ask, I don't get environment from the younger generations, whereas the older generations tend to go, thank you, and stick with what they've been offered.
Okay.
So definite differences.
Great, thank you. Cheers for that, Karen. And definitely I know that if I join Siemens, I can have a 1-month vacation, which is good. So definitely a positive. Thank you so much for tuning into HRD Live podcast. Be sure to check back next week for a different podcast. But for the time being, make sure to follow us on social media accounts to check back when this post is live.